No. You have permission to proceed.
So let me introduce Alan Williams. He's an ecologist from the Shenandoah National Park. He does a scat of things with every kind of living organism you can imagine up there. But in his free time, out of the love of owls and kestrels, he does owls and kestrels in Rappahannock. And many of you know him. He's put up a lot of boxes and helped a lot of us learn a lot more about these cool critters. So I'm not going to spend a lot of time introducing because we've already run over our introductions. I will say that the last time apparently he spoke to RLEP was about 2009, and Bruce Jones was on the board at that time. So we're not exactly sure what his topic was, but tonight it's going to be Al. So I'll just turn it over to Alan.
All right. Well, thank you for coming. This was originally going to be in February, I think, and it was probably snowed out amongst whatever ice creek we had in the neighborhood at the time. But that gave me a little more time to tune up my slides, so hopefully it's better for it. You want to start the presentation? That's gonna help me because but anyways, yeah, so we're going to talk about owls. This was I suggested by somebody, maybe it was Bruce, had the idea initially, and I kind of just took some of the introductory suggestions and went with it. I love all sorts of animals and birds particularly, but I have worked the last 10 years. I worked more with owls than I had before, so it's a little fresher in my mind. But I definitely work with raptors more generally, so hawks and owls. And but the nighttime raptors are particularly interesting because they have all sorts of cool adaptations that, and we don't know as much about them because they're just harder to follow. You know, we can watch a kestrel, we can watch a robin or a phoebe build a nest on our porch, but if we're not outside, even if we are outside, we can't even see them most of the time. So a lot of times we'll hear them. If we're lucky, we'll see them. But so we'll try and reveal some of the mysteries. Are you advancing or am I advancing?
You can advance with the left mouse button. No, it's not the right.
Yeah, let's see about that. Okay, so all right, so these are 4 owls that breed that we're going to talk about mostly, that breed fairly regularly in Virginia and a lot of the East Coast, actually. So the Eastern Screech-Owl, I know it's kind of small, the American Barn Owl, the Barred Owl, and the Great Horned Owl. We'll talk a little bit at the end about other owls that occur in Virginia. And there was a little quiz question in there because there's one more owl that we think breeds in Virginia. Okay. Oh, yeah, you can. All right, Eastern Screech-Owl. This is probably the cutest one. There are 2 morphs. There's a red morph that is kind of like a brick red, and then a gray one, which is more mottled, and this little red one's not, you're sort of seeing the front of it, so it's a little more white on the front. But they've got the ear tufts, big eyes, and the bill is kind of hidden behind the feathers that come across the face. So they're pretty variable, and actually a lot of raptors are pretty variable in terms of, or adaptable. They use many different ecotones or habitat types, but they are quite common in forest edges, particularly if there's like a little bit of a coniferous component. So white pine or cedar around here kind of helps them. They're here year round. They are probably nomadic, but we don't think they really migrate. Their call, they have a couple calls, but they have a trilling call that is like It's like a rolling ball, and that's probably the one you hear more than anyone. And you hear it in the evening. It might be calling from the woods. You might not even pick it up at first. And then it has sort of a whinny, more like a sort of a horse whinny, sometimes more in the breeding season. And they nest in cavities. So they're pretty small. It's scale wise, you can see a person's hand here. They can nest in a kestrel box. So if you've seen a kestrel box about this big, 3-inch hole, they use the same size. So they're a secondary cavity nester. So they're going to nest in a cavity made by somebody else, like a woodpecker, sometimes a broken off branch, or a box like the ones that we put up for kestrels. Interestingly, they are a little more choosy or picky, and they seem to be we're less successful luring them to a screech owl box that we put up for screech owls. I get more of them nesting in other boxes. So in a box that was supposed to be for a kestrel, or I think one of these was that one on the bottom. We just banded this February, or maybe it was in January, at Nick Lapham's place at Sunnyside, and it was in a barn owl box. So I can't successfully put up a screech owl box and have a lot of confidence that they'll come and nest for you. But if you get one, they're pretty cool. One interesting thing is, like a lot of birds, when they are incubating, they are the females are tied to the nest box. And recently we were checking some kestrel boxes in the last couple of weeks, and you put the camera in there, and during the day you could see an owl in there, and it was not moving. It's kind of laying on its side, kind of looked dead. And the people who were checking that box were kind of concerned, and it really wouldn't move. It turns out it's sort of a possum trick. It's like it wants to think that you can't see it, so it's just laying perfectly still, keeps its eyes closed. We ended up being able to trap that bird, take it out. It was happily incubating 4 eggs. So that was a good story. Okay, the next one.
Want to hear that sound, Alan?
Yeah, go ahead, play it.
I think it's just the whinnying. You've heard it.
That's the whinny, yeah. With a little trill at the end, yeah. Nice. I didn't realize I was gonna have AV support. Okay. All right, so
Stop.
maybe you can cue up a barn owl next. Okay, so American barn owl recently. So barn owls are occur all around the world in various forms. Recently, the American barn owl was separated from the European barn owl, so they look very similar, but they were able to use genetics and morphology to describe them as 2 separate species. So this one recently has been renamed the American barn owl. It's the same bird that's been here, but it's a little bit different than the one in Europe. So who's seen a barn owl? Raise your hand if you think you've seen a barn owl. That's pretty good, maybe a third of the folks. Barn owls are more common than you think, but they're harder to find than you hope. They're pretty tricky to find sometimes. And we found that particularly around in the Piedmont, they are a little bit mercurial. They'll come and go a little bit. And it possibly, hopefully it's not a regional decline, but we have some, and they certainly are not as common as they used to be. And certainly not out in the shore, the coastal plain. They used to be more common in the marshes, but for some reason they're definitely being pushed out or not doing well in the marsh. But in the Piedmont, these guys are also a cavity nester, secondary cavity nester. Cavity in quotes really because they're more tolerant of things that aren't really a cavity, but somewhat isolated, sort of protected. We'll talk about that in a second. But if we back up, the look of them, if you're looking at one and you end up seeing one, they look blonde. So they look like a white owl. So if you saw a white owl at night, this is really what you would see. You would see a barn owl. But you can see, and if you're seeing it from below, you're definitely seeing the white belly, like over there, and the white under the wings. From above, they're definitely more tawny, sort of like a brown. The females probably are a little browner, and the males are a little lighter, though there's a lot of variation. These birds really are using the open grassland. So they love our pastures and hayfields. They're primarily eating rodents, although they do eat a fair number of birds also, particularly like marsh birds or open country birds like red-winged blackbirds. And I think we see less evidence of that here in the Piedmont, I think mostly because we have a lot of meadow voles. And so meadow voles are their primary food. But in other regions of the world, in the coastal plain, they'll eat more birds like red-winged blackbirds, but also rice rats, other sorts of sort of nocturnal rodents. But they're using, and all owls, but are using hearing to detect these birds or detect their prey and hone in on them and get, sort of lunge from a glide, or these guys are really not hunting from a perch. Screech owls hunt from a perch. Barn owls are hunting they're out over the field, and sometimes if you're lucky, kind of in the twilight, particularly in around, I'd say, June, when they're feeding young, they're more likely to be sort of doing more foraging. So you have more chance of seeing them, and the days are a little longer. You can get out there. Some like 9 o'clock, you might see them or their silhouette over a field. Not dissimilar from a northern harrier, if you're familiar with those. They hunt diurnally over the fields. Same idea, only these guys would be hunting at night.
Question.
Yes.
What is diurnal?
Diurnal is during the day. Nocturnal, it's opposite of nocturnal. Nocturnal, diurnal.
So Alan, you can just nod at me and I'll do.
Thanks. Okay. So the barred owl is barred. So it has, on the back, it has these vertical bars. On the breast, there's the horizontal bars or streaks. They are primarily a forest owl. And around here, they're the ones that we think of with the sort of the classic call. And they're pretty vocal, particularly in the early winter when they're courting. But they also are more commonly seen during the day in the spring when they're foraging for their young. So you'll see them perched in the woods, and I think probably because they're using camouflage, so they're camouflaged like that bird next to the branch, and they can ambush mostly small rodents like chipmunks, mice that are on the forest floor. They're also around wet areas, so swamps like forested wetlands are quite common where you'll see them. So they're using amphibians, so probably small snakes, frogs, things like that. They're kind of a medium-sized owl, and they're also a cavity nester. So they don't build a nest. Usually they'll use bigger, broken off. They do need a slightly larger hole than the screech owl. But if you were buying a barred owl box, you'd get one that has an opening like 6 to 8 inches or something like that. And it would be more or less twice the size of a Kestrel box. So something like that. And they have, okay, that's not the one we need, but it's close.
Should I play it? You want me to play the?
Yeah, go for it.
They got
I'm sure people have heard it, but that's good to have a reminder.
Or you will have heard this during the day. For those of us that can't get it to work. Sorry, Alan.
That's cool.
Play it at the end.
The barred owl is so they The other reason you might find these birds, particularly if you had a wood lot where you thought you've heard them, is once the young come out of the nest. So they'll come out before they're fully flighted, meaning they have feathers, but they're not flying. They're basically perching on the boxes or limbs nearby. Sometimes they'll take short flights, but they still have a fair amount of down on them. They look way different than the adult. They are sort of gray and puffy looking, and they hiss. And so you can hear this weird sort of hissing in the woods. And if you can, it's hard to triangulate on, but it's them calling to their parents. They'll separate a little bit, but the parents are foraging, bringing food back, and you'll hear this. And sometimes they usually have lay 4 eggs, and there'll be 2 to 4 young that were perched around in the woods, hissing, essentially begging for food. And so if you hear that and you can follow it in, you will be able to probably get pretty close, because they're not scared necessarily of us right when they come out of the cavity. They're really sort of exploring the world. They're sort of seeing what's out there. They'll eventually flush away from you, but they are pretty cool. You can see them during the day. I'm trying to think if there's any. Did you get the call up? We'll do it later.
I'll do it later.
Okay.
I messed it up otherwise.
That's all right. 4th one. Okay, so the great horned owl is the biggest owl of our bunch. It's also has ear tufts of feathers that it's a very powerful hunter.
That's it?
That is the bard. So the last guy.
Yeah.
Yes. Okay, that's good. And they also are the barred owl is quite variable, and they have lots of interaction. The male and female in courtship, they spend a lot of time co-vocalizing. The great horned owl has much more resonant, deep voice, and also is more vocal in the winter as they're courting. Actually, fall and winter, like December through January, they're already feeding young now. So around here, they laid eggs in January and February generally. They're nesting in old stick nests. So they are using red-tailed hawk nests or red-shouldered nests. They don't build a nest. They just use one that they can find in the environment. And so all 3 of those owls are secondary nesters. They don't build a nest, and you won't see them bring anything in like a stick or anything. They'll just use whatever's there. Sometimes they will. All these owls will have feathers that are collected around the nest. Sometimes it's stuff that the down feathers that the female will remove to expose the brood patch that they have that helps incubate the egg. So sometimes you'll get a little bit of feather lining. They're very variable across the whole country. The size varies quite a bit, and the coloration varies quite a bit. But they have, whereas I didn't really point it out, but the barred owl has dark brown eyes. You don't really see a yellow rim, whereas in the great horned owl, you can see more yellow. If you get lucky and you can see one. This is sort of like the nighttime red-tailed hawk. So the red-tailed hawk we see much more frequently hunting outside. They're very similar. It's almost a day shift, night shift thing. They're hunting in very similar habitats. It's along the edges. They definitely need trees to nest in, so you'll see them but they also use big trees that are in a forest or in a field that have a red-tailed nest in it. They will use that as well. They're hunting primarily small mammals, but they can take mammals all the way up to like a groundhog size. So they'll take any sort of fowl like chickens. They probably could take cats. So another reason to keep your cats inside. Groundhog is pretty big. A big female could definitely take a groundhog, but they're probably using smaller items. One of the things that we think they maybe not specialize on, but use a lot of are skunks. So skunks are nocturnal, they're outside. And and interestingly, if you're out in the woods and you smell a skunk during the day, very likely you have just flushed a great horned owl off of a perch who might have been there and smells like skunk because they've been eating skunk. It doesn't bother them, but that whiff is now dragged through the woods. So if you smell a skunk and it's during the day, you're not expecting or seeing a skunk there, it's very likely a great horned owl. You just missed it, just left it. Yeah. That's kind of their claim to fame is skunk eating. But another interesting thing is they're the apex predator for nocturnal predators. So they're also eating or will eat any of the other owls they can catch. So we know that they prey on barn owls for sure. We've definitely seen that evidence. They're sort of in a similar vein. I think they would probably take a barn owl, but they don't use the deep woods as much. But barn owls for sure. There was one other thing I was going to show you about that. Anyways, I think all of the owls are fairly flexible. Probably the barn owls are the most focused, at least around here. They use a lot of small mammal prey. That's because we have in our hayfields and pastures, we have an abundance of meadow voles, and that's the primary thing that a lot of the foxes are eating them. The kestrels are eating them. The barn owls are eating them. I would expect that some of these other owls would use them as well. Oh yeah, so the feet of these owls are super strong. So like a red-tailed hawk, their talons are what they use to kill their prey with. So they have a pretty strong beak, and they use the beak to help them manipulate their prey to make it smaller for the chicks when they're first feeding larger prey to small chicks. But a lot of owls will eat their prey whole. They'll kill it with their feet, and then if it's appropriately sized, and these guys will eat rabbits, quite a few rabbits. So rabbits, voles, smaller prey, they will just kill it, and then down it goes. They gulp it down. It's kind of like impressive to watch happen, sort of strangely gross, but also like, how did that just disappear kind of thing. And then they do sort of like look sort of stunned while they're contemplating this whole process. It gets down, and then it slowly breaks down and digests. So let's go to the next slide, and we'll talk more about the feeding here in a second. A quick review. Screech-owl, barn owl, barred owl, right on cue, and great horned owl. So we've got two horned owls. So if you're looking at a silhouette of what you think is an owl in a tree in a distance, and it has ears, you have two choices. Then you have to decide on how big it is, and you have to get some scale. So is it more like a crow or a red-tailed hawk size, or is it more like a pigeon or a mourning dove or a kestrel size? Those were your choices. Okay, next. So I spend most of my time I spend with barn owls and what they eat. But in this case, you can sort of see this is a mouse hanging from the beak of that barn owl. This one, you see 2 feet and a tail, so it's almost gone. And and one of the ways we know what they eat without watching them, because we can't really watch them that well when they're hunting, is the next slide, is we look at the owl pellets. So these are this is what's regurgitated after they swallow it whole. It is digested and broken down. What can be absorbed can be, and then what is not easily absorbed, which is primarily the bones and the fur, is compacted into a pellet, which looks sort of like this. And then when they're ready, probably 4 hours after they eat, maybe more, they will cough it up. And so when you look below a place where an owl has been resting, you will find, if you're lucky, you will find owl pellets. So I have some samples. I've got 2 bags, and you can look through. This is a common school science project these days, where the science teacher can order barn owl pellets and like dissecting kits, and the kids can poke through, pull it apart, and find the evidence of the critters. And there's whole guides for teachers to do this. It's very cool to be able to reconstruct the critter that has just been eaten. And I'm going to pass these bags around. These are ones that I collected, actually in the Texas barn. John and Steph might know where that is. Amy might know where that is. Out in, I don't know what you call that area. It's Hume, yeah. These were collected off the floor, kind of in and around. So I'll pass these around. You can look at them. If you're brave, you can open up the bag. It's a little stinky, so I don't know. I wouldn't recommend it. And you can sort of paw through them and break it apart if you want. There's just some feathers in each one too, but and we can look at this later when you open up. But those are typical barn owl pellets. Interestingly, the barn owls don't build a nest, or they don't build a nest. They don't bring anything to their nest. When we put up a nest box, we put in some padding. We put in some wood shavings to just get them started, because it's not a natural thing. But if they were in a natural cavity, which would be like either a hollow tree, or like a scrape on a stream bank, or some sort of cliff where they also will nest naturally, they will just lay the eggs right on the ground. But if they've been there roosting and regurgitating pellets for any length of time, these pellets just are on the ground, break down, and become, there's a lot of fur in there. And so it ends up being sort of a fur-lined nesting chamber. And so once it's broken down, it actually is quite like soft. It's because it's mostly rodent fur, for around here anyway. All right, next slide. Okay, so how do they do it? How can you get along in the dark? Because we know, like when we turn out the lights in here, we're happy to be able to see better of something that's bright, but when it's too bright, we can't see the things that are dim. When we're outside in the dark, we're almost helpless. I mean, we cannot see that well when it's dark. And furthermore, we're usually too loud to hear anything useful either. If we are trying to hear things, we can get some aid by being quiet. But let's look. So go ahead and you can advance through. So the couple of adaptations to how they can make it in the dark. They can see in the dark with some special adaptations. They have ability to hear very faint sounds, and they have cool adaptations for nearly silent flight. So one of the things that we notice when we look at owls and why we think, even in the nursery rhymes, we think of the owls as wise. I think we resonate with the big eyes. So the big eyes are not just because they're cute, it's because bigger eyes can collect more light. So if you have a big eye, go ahead. And owls have particularly large eyes a lot of raptors have large eyes, but owls have particularly large eyes. They have an adaptation to, instead of having a spherical eyeball, they have a conical or a cylindrical eyeball. That's not a ball anymore, but a eye socket. They have receptive cells that are about 35 to 40% more sensitive than what humans can see at night. And because their eyes are offset, they also they have overlap in the middle, so they have binocular view, binocular vision, similar to us. You may be familiar with some prey or other mammals, particularly smaller rodents. Their eyes are kind of on the side of their head, so they can see. They have good peripheral vision, but they don't have good binocular vision, so they can't. Their depth of field is not as good. So being able to have, if you have overlap on your eyes, you can detect distance a lot more easily, and that's important if you're hunting with your vision. Okay, I don't really know all the anatomy here, but basically the longer eye has more room for cells and sensitivity. So the size and the shape plus the sensitive thing and the binocular vision all help. Next slide. And that translates to this cool thing. So because their eyes are a cylinder, like we can hold our head steady and move our eyes, but owls cannot move their eyes. So if they are going to look at something over here, they turn their head. And so that's why this is sort of weird. It will like turn to look at you. And owls can turn up to 270 degrees. So that's whipping around to see stuff behind them so they can stay perched and they can move their head. And frequently, if you see an owl perched and you make a noise and they look at you, they have to do this, lean forward and move their head to look down. And that's because they can't rotate their eyes in the socket, they're fixed. So they adapted to have good vision, and then to compensate for the poor eye movement, you have extra flexible neck. So that's helpful for staying at the same perch and seeing what's around you. Okay, next slide. So the ears on our eared owls are not really for hearing, right? Those are really just decorations. They make them look bigger. They make them look maybe scarier. They're ornamentation. The feathers, they're coincidentally in places where we think of ears on like mammals, but their ears are behind their eyes. So they're kind of below the little ear tufts, but they're behind their eyes. And next slide. They have very big openings to their ears, and they're covered by the feathers, so you can't actually see it unless you pull the feathers away. And it's very close to the eye. So if you see where their eyes are, just rotate right back. You can see it. If you ever get a chance to see or hold an owl in their hand, or see one maybe while I'm banding someday, we'll try to point out the ear. But the ears are just back there, and they're big. Next slide. So the two other adaptations to making the ears more sensitive or making the hearing more effective is their face. So the face is, on the barn owl, it's sort of heart-shaped, but so the other owls have this big eye disc. So that disc is sort of like a plate, and it's like a satellite dish. It helps focus the sound that's coming at the face and direct it to the ear hole. And there's a little flap that can cover the ear if they need to, but they can open that flap. And then the other thing is that most owls have an asymmetrical ear arrangement, sort of like, on this one, so next slide, we can show you a skull. So here's a skull that shows that you can see there's one side is lower than the other side. And this is not very pronounced, but you can see it here. But it's an adaptation to be able to sort of echolocate. So you can, if your ears are asymmetrical and you hear in your brain hear something on one side earlier than the other, it helps you get, if like we have binocular hearing too, but we have it like two directions. Since they're offset, they can pick up more up and down. So like it's more of a three-dimensional picture, we think, in their brain. But hearing is probably the most important, like beginning when you hear your prey, you hear it rustling in the grass, you kind of need to, if you're an owl, you need to get facing the right direction. And if it's still moving, you can focus in, you can get closer. You're using your eyes as you get closer to look for obstacles mostly, and then you'll be able to pounce on whatever is moving in there. And the benefit, or for this to pay off, you have to be able to approach silently. Okay, because if you're making too much noise, you're not going to be able to hear them, and they're going to be able to hear you. So if you're walking up trying to catch a mouse and it hears you coming, it's just going to hide. But if it can't hear you coming, you have the advantage. Next slide. That's where the silent flight comes in. And these owls mostly all have larger wings than a similar sized raptor of the same sort of body length. So they have more wing area, and a couple other things that we'll go into that help with this silent flight. Let's try the next slide. So this is a cool, if it plays for us here in a second, this is a cool thing that's on the BBC website. It's a cool here's a peregrine falcon. So that's a really cool segment. That if you're interested in owls, you should go look at that documentary, because they go into some other really cool things. I just want to play that because the sound thing is really obvious there. So that's kind of the thing that's the benefit. How do they accomplish that? It's a multifaceted thing. One is the wing size. So I talked about how big the wings are, and relative to the body size. Another cool thing, and this is a little harder to see, and I have some show and tell, and I want to pass around, and then maybe once the lights come on, you can appreciate it a little bit more. But it's hard to appreciate that that silence when you don't have the ability to sort of deal at the microscopic level along the feathers. But one of the things that, and again, it's not just one thing, but there's a variety of things that summarize down basically means that instead of being a sharp wing, it's a more soft wing. It's more curved, it's larger, it has more texture, and all of that means that the surface of the air, and I don't know if you've ever taken a blade of grass, put it between your thumbs and blow on it. When you're blowing, vibrating a very thin thing like a reed instrument, like an oboe or a clarinet or a piece of grass, you're blowing air over a very skinny, sharp kind of thing that then oscillates or vibrates and creates the sound. So what the owls are doing is they're having a more blunt, textured surface that when it vibrates, it doesn't resonate, or it resonates. There's enough dissonance in the resonance that you don't get a tone that's audible. And you can think about it in terms of turbulence. It's basically lots of little swirls instead of it being this straight stream. So their wing is less efficient. They're not as good. They don't soar. They don't glide well because they have an inefficient wing. But the inefficient wing is quiet. So when you look at this feather, and I have a couple different other feathers to look at. If you look at some, so here's a turkey vulture feather. Here's anybody know this one? Wild turkey, yep. And here's a barn owl feather. And I've got some more, I think those are the main, this is also, I think turkey vulture. If you look at the top of the surface, you'll see that it's textured. It's almost like fuzz. It's a little, well, you could call it looks like fur, but it's not fur. It's just, it's little curls of feather material. So you have a large wing, you have, oh yeah, and then the other thing is if you look at the front of it, it has these bristles. So instead of it being a very tight or tightly or sharp edge, it's broken up. So that's again the edge on the leading edge, and then the edge of the back is also a little more. Their wing is. I don't have a good picture of it, but the wing is a little more scalloped. So all of that together means that it's less. It's more drag, but less of a sharp resonance when it goes through the air. So I can pass these around. I'll just pass around the box and you can look. Then afterwards we can look at these up here. Okay. Oh yeah, that's just a little bit of a close-up. You can see that combed edge. This is the leading edge of the wing of one of the primary feathers. So if you find a feather in the woods, you can look at it. If you know enough to look at, you can decide if it's an owl or not. Because if you have any of these modifications, it's going to be one of those 4 owls, most likely. If you're lucky enough to find some coloration on there, you might be able to pick out what kind of. So here's an owl. This is a screech owl in the light. You can sort of just. We're going to look at this one for a second, and then we're going to look at the next one, and then we can toggle back. So I don't know if you can tell that, but this one's sharper. It's not as soft. Go back. There's particularly over here on the secondaries, it's a little softer. It's partly the light. I picked it so it looks. But if you don't know the wing, these are the primary feathers. These are similar to our hand. This is out here. This up here would be similar to the thumb. And then underneath here, we call these the secondaries. They kind of fill in behind the backside of the arm. And then these feathers that are on the top are coverts. They're the ones that sort of fill in the gap. Okay. So that's American kestrel. Similar colors, but not as silent as flyer, and everything is sharper. Okay. Okay, so that's some of the adaptations to that make them good at living in the dark or at night, and being able to hunt and evade predators. I didn't mention this before, but if you are trying to find out what owls live in your area, and you use some songs that are recorded to try and call into the woods or to do some playback to see who might be out there. A little word to the wise: if you want to see who's out there, you're gonna want to start playing the small owls first. If you start with a great horned owl, everybody else, if they're out there, are not going to say anything. So you need to start small and work your way up, because the little guys will hear it, they're going to zip it. They're not going to say anything, because as soon as they do, they're letting the big guy know where they are. So it is a little bit of a strategic, you got to do some planning. Okay, so yeah, cat and mouse. So you want to help owls out here. Here's some things that you all can do. This is one of the biggest ones. Help remove rodent poisons. So any sort of rat poison, there are lots of different flavors out there, but typically anything that's in a block that's just broadcast out. There's a lot of reasons that these are bad, but one of the saddest ones is that how this gets into the food stream of other non-targets. So it's very good at killing rodents, but those sick rodents, before they die, often make it into the food chain, and that then hurts other raptors. Owls are one of the the ones that get it. But, and then it might not, you know, a single snack of a sick rat that has been eaten or has eaten a little might not kill the owl, but it can make them sick depending on the poison. It can cause them then to be, after a couple more meals, to be weak and not able to hunt anymore. So that's one of the big ones. So tell your friends. There's other ways. Live traps are much better, or kill traps even are better. Also, this is not good for your dogs or any pets. So basically, don't use it if you can help it. Okay, that's one. So I'm borrowing from our friends in the room, but help preserve healthy habitat diversity. So this is going to help a lot of things, but particularly in the Piedmont where we have a lot of grasslands, maintaining diversity of habitats, trying to maintain native plants, native habitats are going to help with the native prey items that then are part of the food chain for the larger animals. So in this diagram, this is what I borrowed from the Grassland Bird Initiative. You know, we're illustrating a complement of species that can make it in this environment. We have different lengths of grass that are good. We have woods nearby that are probably healthy. In this case, they've left their cool silos up. That's not really part of the natural environment, but in this case, it's part of the working environment, so it might be there anyway. Okay. This is another cool one, particularly for these cavity nesters. If you can safely leave your snags either along a tree line or at the edge of a wood line or out in the open field, they have a whole host of things services that they provide. In addition to housing, there's lots of insects that are eating that, breaking it down. That's food for other, like woodpeckers. There's all sorts of hiding places in there. Once they fall on the ground, they're still good because then rodents and things will use them on the ground. But you know, be careful. Don't leave one right next to your house. And if you have the ability to look around the landscape, look for old either natural structures or man-made structures that are not really being used or on the back 40. You can see if you have some activity. I know there's definitely a couple of people out here who have some barn owls historically in or around their property. They love these kind of old buildings that are more or less not in the normal rotation, but they also will use structures that are kind of in the middle of a farm that's being used, but you know, it's not in a part of the building that's being used. So frequently the silos are really good because almost nobody's using a vertical silo anymore. And so they're there, they might not even have a roof anymore. They're pretty protected. Owls will nest on the ground in those sometimes. Frequently we'll put a box in there just to give them an option about halfway up. But if you're looking around in the landscape, look for whitewash, look for pellets, and look for feathers. All of those will be clues that owls are already using it. And if they are, then you might consider putting up a structure to have them nest there. Oh yeah, the carefully bit was mostly they are dangerous. So also be careful when you're wandering around. So this is also a borrowed graphic, but just to illustrate that in this particular graphic, there are multiple owls that are supported by some sort of cavity. So if you have the ability to consider some sort of nesting structure, any of these wildlife would benefit. But be a little realistic because just because you put it up doesn't mean that they're gonna come. It can be kind of frustrating. And so if you have your heart set on it, just be, you know, it's kind of a long-term goal maybe. Unless you're lucky. If you already have sign, you increase your chances. So if you have a barn or a silo and you see barn owl pellets, for instance, it's going to increase your chances that we could put a box up and they would be successful. But so that's a good, we want to support them if we can. Thanks to VWL and Nick Conhart for this illustration. And then, of course, go outside and listen, because that's another way you can find these critters and other cool stuff that's outside. Crickets, frogs. This is a screech-owl. Yeah. If you really want to watch and like spy on owls that are in the middle of their nesting, right now, just over in Washington, the Sunnyside Farm and Conservancy has an active barn owl nest. I think they're still on eggs. They have 7 eggs, and there's a live webcam. And if you go to this website, I think you can probably get like a 30-day free subscription. You could also consider to subscribe to their program to enjoy other sort of wildlife in their system. But this is a cool way to kind of see it happening. They're going to start hatching pretty soon, probably within a week, maybe 2. The young will start hatching. Yeah, excellent. Just a little bit of plug back about other owls that can be in Virginia. So anybody besides Amy know what the owl on the right is there? On the left? So the right, yeah, we have the snowy owl. So they erupt down here in the winters when the food is not as abundant in the northern part of the Canada and US. They'll come down, say occasionally they'll show up in open country. Also, like a lot of times they'll be at airports or sitting on hay bales. You know what they really like to sit on are those white silage bags that are on the ground. I think they think it's like snow, and so they're sitting on that. So the middle one looks like a deer in the headlights.
Yeah.
Anybody got that one?
Yes.
So that's a northern saw-whet. Yeah, so that one, they also spend the winter here, and there's definitely evidence of breeding in Western Virginia in the higher elevations. Not very common, but West Virginia, Virginia, they breed down into the higher parts of but they're mostly Canada and a little bit of New England. They also nest in cavities. Sorry.
Are they greenish? Really green?
No, that's a little bit of just the funny lighting. They're kind of variable, not quite as they're more brown or more gray than brown. If you looked at the screech-owl, they're kind of similar to that, but they're pretty gray. They're small. They're the smallest one around here. It's hard to describe how cute and fluffy they are, but there's kind of like this, there are a couple places where they have banding for them in the fall, basically as they're migrating. The nearest one here is currently over outside of Harrisonburg. But if you find one of those, that's fun to go and watch. They play back their songs and lure them into mist nets and then catch them and band them. The far your left, anybody have that one?
Short ear.
Short ear, yep. So this one is a cool one. It's a complement to the harrier, also an open grass country or swampland. They are communal roosters in the winter, so you'll sometimes see multiples. They're kind of elusive in Virginia. You kind of have to know somebody who's got them on their farm or sign up. So I think BWL tried to have like a short-eared owl walk this winter. I don't know if you pulled it off yet. You got 2? Okay, so that's cool. Yeah, okay. So they're pretty cool. They're I think they definitely hunt at night. They're kind of more crepuscular, I think. They're hunting in the late afternoon, early evening, the shorter days of the winter. But they're primarily breeding in the north. There is evidence of them breeding in Maryland pretty recently basically kind of in marshes, so grassland. They nest on the ground. Snowies nest on the ground, and saw-whets nest in a cavity. So thank you for coming. If you don't know Roger Jones, this is Bruce's brother. He's the one who got me into barn owls. Some of us are living in a house that he has in outside of Sperryville. So Roger was a longtime raptor enthusiast, supporter, and his legacy continues with support for DWL. But this is him holding a barn owl. This is actually this is just over the hill. Yeah, this is what we call the Stoke Silo, which is just outside of the Seven Islands Preserve. Yeah, just south of Sperryville. So I don't know how many questions we have time for, but yeah.
So in that one photo of the ones that weren't here and some of the other ones, they all have yellow irises. Is that some benefit, evolutionary benefit?
I don't know. It is interesting because the barn owl doesn't have that as prominently for some reason. Maybe it's something to being out in the open. I don't know. Anybody else know? It's a good one. I don't know.
I don't know, but I have another question.
Yes.
The migration of the barn owls out west to the west, like to California.
Okay. Yeah.
Could you repeat the question for the Zoom?
Yeah.
Was that a natural migration? They I don't know word to use in terms of that, of them just migrating over there. And I know they're doing a lot up there about that, but was that a natural migration that happened?
Yeah. So the question was, so right now barn owls are becoming more common and kind of a nuisance in the Northwest, and they compete with the spotted owl that's out there. It's similar. Is that what you're talking about?
Yeah.
And
They're screech owls.
yeah, and the screech owl would be smaller. The barn owl is the one that's kind of taking over areas where spotted owls would normally. But yeah, so I don't think that was an assisted migration. I think that has to do with I think when we had prairies that were extensive, there was more of a barrier because they are a forest dweller. Now that we have more of a patchwork in our environment, probably more woodlots. We have a broken up, it's probably still fairly open, but I suspect it has to do with a bit more connectivity with woods between the east and the west than historically might have been there. And maybe it's sort of a natural gradual thing that's happened since the last ice age, but I suspect it's a little more related to human activity and it's less there's less grass. There's probably more other things that the barn owls could use to get through that habitat. Now that they're established, they don't need a connection to the east anymore.
Let's get one from Zoom here if we could. Tracy Jackman says she's seen several tiny owls on the roads at night. Do you saw owls sit on the road at night?
Yes.
Yeah, so a lot of owls do. I think it's pretty common in the east to have screech owls hunt on the road. But I think in the winter you probably could get saw-whets as well. But I've seen a lot of screech owls, and one of the reasons why I included the Blue Ridge Wildlife Center is that screech owls suffer a lot on the roads because they do get hit on the roads. And if you ever encounter wildlife, that particularly birds that are injured, I recommend the Blue Ridge Wildlife Center. They are pretty good. There's other options too, but they can connect you to if there's other local rehabbers. But we've had pretty good luck getting birds up to them. They're outside of Berryville, Virginia. It's a little bit of a drive, but sometimes they have couriers that will take wildlife down there. But I would say, yeah, so they're hunting stuff that's either along the roadside.
McDonald burgers.
What's that?
There are McDonald burgers in the ditch. They're attracting
The birds, yeah.
mice.
But so there are a lot of so edges in general, particularly edges of fields that turn into roads. Those ditches have a lot of stuff that's going on in them. That's what they're taking advantage of. Yeah, but you can frequently see them sitting on the road.
Good.
Yeah.
Are owl populations at risk due to egg-eating snakes?
No. We have snakes. It's part of the natural environment. They definitely eat the eggs, and but it wouldn't be the primary driver. They mostly have adaptations to dealing with that. Sometimes they will nest again. We've just had a nest back out in off of Steph and John's place that where there were eggs in a barn owl box, and then there was a snake in the barn owl box, and it looked pretty fat. So that had eaten the eggs. So they do it, but it's not. It wouldn't be. It'd be very unlikely that that would be a driver for a for a problem, a population problem. It's very likely other things that are broader scale to do with either avian diseases like avian flu, broader scale use of rodenticides, things that affect their prey, like other things that cascade. So there's a lot of insects that are affected by modern pest management, and that's going to trickle down and harm or affect a fair number of birds. So we don't really know all the things, but the one of the low things on the list would be sort of a natural predator that would be affected. And a lot of these owls would eat snakes too. So if they had the ability, so there would already be a little bit of counter activity to that, where they don't have a way to deal with the poisons. That's just like there's only a one-sided ticket.
Another quick twofer question. When should nesting boxes be cleaned out, and should we leave the lights off at night for barn owls in our silo? I know the answer to that.
So barn owl boxes, so barn owls can nest almost any time of the year. Biologically, anytime their prey is abundant enough that they can that they find prey, they can nest. So almost any month of the year. But primarily they're nesting in the spring. Now they've got eggs or young, and they're thinking of laying. And so you would want to consider cleaning them out if you're going to clean them in the summer, late summer, early fall. That would be the sort of the safest time. If you clean too late in the spring, or too early in the spring, too late in the winter, you run the risk of scaring them out when they're trying to establish a territory or during courtship. So late summer, early fall.
And lights.
So yeah, I think they will benefit from having less light because they're adapted to not having light. If the light's around, some predators will benefit from some light because they can see the prey better. And the prey items will, if it never gets dark, they'll come out anyway. But I think in general, a dark environment is going to be better. So if you have the ability to turn off the barnyard lights, the silo lights, it's probably good.
Michael.
Yeah, I just want to say, like, how are the populations doing? Are they healthy, growing? Are they vulnerable? Like, why do you help?
So they are vulnerable, and we don't really know because they're hard to study. We do know that from probably in the 90s, there was a grad student that worked at William and Mary who did a pretty extensive study, occupancy study throughout the state. And they found a lot of occupancy in the coastal plain, in these marshland areas. They were primarily using boxes, but they also used a lot of hunting blinds, like duck blinds and things that are already out there. Recent revisit of a lot of that about 3 years ago found almost no usage down there. So they had maybe 80% occupancy in a lot of those areas. It was mostly like wildlife management areas and things like that most of those are vacant. And I think we know less about the Piedmont and the Blue Ridge because you have to get permission to go look in these places where they're using. So we just don't have as good data. In our little sort of study area where we do have permission and we are putting up boxes and we are trying to learn a bit more, they seem like they're pretty variable. We'll have places like Bruce's silos have been historically occupied for a number of years. For the last like 3 years, they've not used that. We had also been doing a little bit of tinkering around the edges, moving the boxes around. That maybe is related, but we've also had places where we're fairly manipulative, putting trackers. Amy has a student who's doing some work with barn owls and looking at home ranges and trying to figure out what they're eating where. And last year we did some experimental putting on GPS trackers, and we probably disrupted a little behavior in one box, but then there was another box that was almost unfazed, and they produced the clutch that we were watching, and then another clutch after that. So 2 back-to-back clutches. So some places it seems like they're doing okay, like we see them there regularly. In some places they seem like they may have sort of blinked out. Maybe they'll come back. We just don't know. They are, they're sort of short to medium lifespan birds. It's kind of a tough life, particularly if you don't migrate around here, as the winter showed with the ice that we had for so. Can you imagine trying to get a vole through that? You could barely. You didn't even fall through. You're walking right on top of that stuff for like 2 weeks, 3 weeks. So if you were an owl trying to make a living for those couple of weeks in February, it was pretty tough. And we found 2 dead owls in March that otherwise looked fairly healthy, right, shortly after that. We don't really know, but it suggests that they may have starved or gotten, malnourished somehow. Sorry about that, Al. So that could be related, but I think it's more cyclical. One other thing that's a little bit interesting, I'm not sure about yet, but sort of a natural sort of competition for cavities, and this is something that we've noticed maybe at Bruce's, is black vultures are they also nest in sort of abandoned structures, and they work during the day and are fairly aggressive, and they seem like their populations are pretty well supported right now. If you look at some migration things, the vultures in general are doing pretty well. That's that may be sad because they eat a lot of roadkill, so our road mortality is providing more support for them right now. But I think where we have potential cohabitation in abandoned structures with barn owls and black vultures, that the black vultures win, because the vultures are there during the day and they seem like they would chase out an owl that's just, even if they're not nesting, they're just roosting and they're trying to be quiet during the day. The vultures may chase them out. Places where I've seen them together, they don't last together very long. It seems like the vultures end up taking over the show. And I have some places on some farms where they're in different structures. And for a while at Bruce's, they would always be in the vultures would be fine in the western silo, but the owls were in the east, but the vultures moved over and now we don't have any barn owls. So it's a little suggestive, but I'm sure.
And we're down to the last question. I'm going to take it from Ed McClellan. I'm going to reword your question just a little bit. He asked about information on boxes. So you put up boxes on landowners' properties. How does someone get into that gravy train? How if I want a box on my property, how do I get in touch with the box maker?
It's an elaborate secret handshake. There's also it's kind of being at the right place at the right time. Well, if you're inclined and you're handy and you want to do stuff on your own, one of the links I had up was Nest Watch. The Cornell website has very good guidelines for nest structures, including barn owl boxes and things like that. If you're local and you know somebody around here who might have one or is interested, you can get in contact with me. If it looks good, like the habitat looks good, I like putting them up. So you can eventually, it's not a quick process because we have to build them and then we have to take them out there and put them in. And almost every one is kind of unique because of, all these old structures have their own character. But I do put up boxes, so for barn owls particularly.
Okay.
But I'm happy to maybe answer questions on other ones that people have. They can reach out to me or so yeah, the Nest Watch is good. If you look at on the website for Virginia Grassland Bird Initiative, they have some good resources for birds, nesting birds, particularly the grassland ones. Yeah, and you can also maybe get help from Clifton Institute in Warrenton. They have often do site evaluations for people looking for habitat modification. Some of the things that they can recommend are for bird boxes and things like that as well.
And I can tell that we would go on for hours and hours and hours, but alas, we lose the room on the hour. So thank you very much. 14 years are up. And thank you all for coming. We do definitely appreciate your participation in these, and we appreciate all the work you're doing on your properties to make them better habitat for owls and bats and all the other critters that we've been talking about during the speaker series. This is the last one for this season, but we'll open again for business in September.